Last week, the committee held classified and unclassified sessions on the state of the world, or more accurately, the state of the world environment in which the American military must operate and U.S. national security must be protected. I was struck by the essential point General Petraeus made that we face many threats and can overcome any of them, except perhaps what we do to ourselves. Today, we turn to the state of the U.S. military. I continue to be concerned and sometimes even disturbed by evidence that is accumulating on the damage inflicted upon our military in recent years and the stresses our forces are under. That damage comes from a variety of factors, including budget cuts of 20%, continuing resolutions, the failure to recognize or at least admit and then address mounting readiness problems, as well as the shrinking size of the force while keeping the tempo of operations high. There is certainly plenty of blame to go around between both parties and both the executive and legislative branches for this state of affairs. But now, with a new administration and a new Congress, we have an opportunity to begin the repairs. To do that, we need a clear understanding of the state of our military and the immediate trends that challenge us. For that, we turn to the vice chiefs of each of our services, and we ask that each of you provide this committee your best professional military judgment in answering the questions we pose. As was emphasized last week, the world situation is dangerous and complex. This is no time to exaggerate or to underplay the challenges before us. Only by facing them squarely can we meet the obligations all of us have to the Constitution, to the men and women who serve, and to the American public. I would now yield to the distinguished acting ranking member, the gentleman from Tennessee, for any comments he'd like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to ask unanimous consent that the opening statement of the real ranking member, Mr. Smith, be inserted in the record.
Without objection.
And speaking on my own behalf, I think we all realize that few subjects are more important for the future of the nation than the readiness of our military forces. And I hope that we all know that few things are more detrimental to that readiness than sequestration. So I share the Chairman's hope, and I'm not ready to be optimistic yet, but I hope that we can deal with sequestration this year and end it permanently. So it's going to be up to the folks on this committee, the largest committee in the House of Representatives, to make sure that our impact is felt in ending sequestration. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to the testimony of the witnesses.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased to welcome each of our witnesses today and also to express, I know, the committee's appreciation for your service in this job and for each of your service to the country. Without objection, your complete written statements will be made part of the record. And let me just briefly introduce General Daniel Allen, Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, Admiral William Moran, Vice Chief of Naval Operations, General Stephen Wilson, Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force, and General Glenn Walters, Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps. Again, thank you all for being here. We would be interested in any opening comments each of you would like to make. We'll start with you, General Allen.
Thank you, Chairman Thornberry and Congressman Cooper, distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the state of your United States Army. I appreciate your support and demonstrated commitment to our soldiers, Army civilians, families, and veterans, and look forward to discussing the strength of our Army with you today. This is a challenging time for our nation, and certainly for our Army. The unipolar moment is over, and replacing it is a multipolar world characterized by competition and uncertainty. Today, the Army is globally engaged with more than 182,000 soldiers supporting combatant commanders in over 140 worldwide locations. My recent travel, I've visited our soldiers in 15 countries since Veterans Day, reinforces that the Army is not about programs. It's all about people. our people executing security missions all around the globe. The strength of the all-volunteer force truly remains our soldiers. These young men and women are trained, ready, and inspired, and we must be similarly inspired to provide that for them commensurate with their extraordinary service and sacrifice. To meet the demands of today's unstable global security environment and maintain the trust placed in us by the American people, the Army requires sustained, long-term, and predictable funding. Absent additional legislation, the caps set by the Budget Control Act of 2011 will return in FY18, forcing the Army to once again draw down our end strength, reduce funding for readiness, and increase the risk of sending undertrained and poorly equipped soldiers into harm's way, a preventable risk our nation must not accept. We thank all of you for recognizing that plans to reduce the Army to 980,000 soldiers would threaten our national security, and we appreciate all your work to stem the drawdown. Nevertheless, the most important actions you can take, steps that will have both positive and lasting impact, will be to immediately repeal the 2011 Budget Control Act and ensure sufficient funding to train, man, and equip the FY17 NDAA authorized force. Unless this is done, additional top-line and OCO funding, though nice in the short term, will prove unsustainable, rendering all your hard work for naught. In this uncertain environment, readiness remains our #1 priority. Sufficient and consistent funding is essential to build and sustain current readiness, to progress towards a more modern, capable force sized to reduce risk for contingencies, and to recruit and train the best talent within our ranks. Readiness remains paramount because the Army does not have the luxury of taking a day off. We must stand ready at a moment's notice to defend the United States and its interests. With your assistance, the Army will continue to resource the best trained, best equipped, and best led fighting force in the world. We thank you for the steadfast support of our outstanding men and women in uniform, and please accept my written testimony for the record, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Admiral.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to the members of the committee. It's a privilege to be here with my fellow vice chiefs to talk about the readiness of our military. It's easiest for me to talk to you in terms of simple supply and demand. As many of you know, the ongoing demand for naval forces far exceeds our long-term supply, and that need continues to grow with no end in sight. Supply is best summed up in one fact. Your Navy today is the smallest it's been in 99 years. That said, we are where we are, which makes it urgent to adequately fund, fix, and maintain the fleet that we do have. And by the way, we have never been busier. A quick snapshot around the globe and you'll see the Navy is the nation's primary deterrence policy in places like the Arabian, Mediterranean, and South China Seas. Over the past 5 or 6 years, this call for deterrence and to be ready to take action has grown, principally because of the aggressive growth from expanding naval competitors like Russia and China. And when you add threats from Iran, North Korea, ISIS, and others, it's a very, very busy time for your Navy. Our sailors have always risen to the occasion, answering the call no matter the circumstances and no matter the resources. From providing food, water, and medical assistance in Haiti, to striking hostile sites in Yemen, to Navy SEALs taking down terrorist leaders, we're getting it done because that's who we are, and that's what makes us the best Navy in the world. But the unrelenting pace, inadequate resources, and small size are taking their toll. Our testimony today may seem like a broken record. Our Navy faces increased demand without the size and resources required to properly maintain and train for our future. And every year we've had to make tough choices. often choosing to sacrifice long-term readiness to make sure we can better be ready to answer the call today. We are, in fact, putting our first team on the field, but we lack serious depth on the bench. This didn't happen overnight. Readiness declines tend to be insidious. From year to year, we've all learned to live with less and less. We have certainly learned to execute our budget inefficiently with 9 consecutive continuing resolutions. But this has forced us to repeatedly take money from cash accounts that are the lifeblood of building long-term readiness in our Navy. It's money for young lieutenants to fly high and fast and who need air under their seats to perfect their skills in the future. It's money for spare parts so sailors can fix the gear that they have. And it's money for sailors to operate at sea in all kinds of conditions to build instincts that create the best warfighters in the world. With your help, we have the opportunity to change this. It starts by strengthening our foundation. Let's ensure that the ships and aircraft that we do have are maintained and modernized so they provide the full measure of combat power. Then let's fill in the holes by eliminating the inventory shortfalls in ships, submarines, and aircraft throughout the fleet. And together, by taking these steps, we can achieve the ultimate goal of sizing the Navy to meet the strategic demands of this dynamic and changing world. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to your questions.
General Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman Thornberry, Congressman Cooper, and distinguished members of the committee. On behalf of the Secretary of the Air Force and our Chief of Staff, it's an honor to be with you today and to be with my fellow Vice Chiefs to talk to you about the state of our Air Force and readiness. Your American Airmen are proud to be part of the most powerful joint force warfighting team in its history. Together, we provide leaders with a broad range of options, protect our country and its interests both home and abroad. For the past 70 years, responsive, flexible, and agile American air power has been our nation's first and most sustainable solution in both crisis and conflict, underwriting every other instrument of power. We provide the nation with unrelenting global vigilance, global reach, and global power. In short, your Air Force is always in demand and always there. Look no further than 2 weeks ago when your Air Force executed a precision strike in Sirte, Libya, killing over 100 violent extremists. This was a textbook trans-regional, multi-domain, multi-function mission. Air Force space, cyber, and ISR warriors provided precision navigation and timing while monitoring enemy communication and movement. Simultaneously, 2 B-2 bombers took off from Missouri, flew 17 hours one way, refueled with numerous tankers, and teamed with 2 MQ-9s to employ precision munitions within 10 seconds of their designated time over target. They then flew another 17 hours home and landed safely back in the United States. Meanwhile, airmen operate 60 persistent, remotely piloted aircraft patrols, 24/7, 365. They're the unblinking eye for combatant commanders. They remotely fly missions from the continental United States, teaming with nearly 20,000 forward-deployed airmen to support operations like the recent events in Raqqa and Mosul, where our RPA fighters and bombers have conducted 92% of the strikes against ISIS. We did this all while simultaneously ensuring 2/3 of our nuclear triad and 75% of our nuclear command and control remain robust, reliable, flexible, and survivable options for the nations. During the allotted time of this hearing, an average of 65 mobility aircraft will take off, 430,000 cyber connections will be blocked, 5 homeland defense missions will fly, and 3 strikes against ISIS will occur. Each of these actions are enabled by airmen providing space-based position, navigation, timing, and communication for our military, while also providing GPS capability to the world's 3 billion users. The capabilities of our airmen to provide to our nation and our allies have never been more vital, and the global demand for American air power will only grow in the future. American airmen remain professional, innovative, dedicated, and quite frankly, the envy of the world. However, we are out of balance. The demand for our mission and our people exceed the supply. 26 years of continuous combat has limited our ability to prepare for the future against advanced future threats. scenarios with the lowest margin of error and the highest risk to national security. This nonstop combat, paired with the budget instability and lower-than-planned top lines, has made the United States Air Force the smallest, oldest equipped, and least ready in our history. We've attempted to balance risk across the force to maintain readiness, but have been forced to make unacceptable trades between readiness, force structure, and modernization. Today's global challenges require an Air Force ready not only to defeat violent extremism, but an Air Force prepared to modernize for any threat the nation may face. Mr. Chairman, I'll close by quoting General Douglas MacArthur. He sent the following cable as he escaped the Philippines in 1942. He said, "The history of failure in war can be summed up in 2 words: too late. Too late in comprehending the deadly purpose of a potential enemy, too late in realizing the mortal danger, too late in preparedness." Distinguished members of the committee, preparedness or readiness cannot be overlooked. Your Air Force needs congressional support to repeal the Budget Control Act and provide stable, predictable funding. It's critical to rebuilding our military's full-spectrum readiness, which is the #1 priority for the Secretary of Defense. We need to act now, before it's too late. On behalf of the Chief of Staff and Secretary of the Air Force and the 660,000 active Guard, Reserve, and civilian airmen who serve our nation, thank you for your tireless support for us. I look forward to your questions.
General Walters.
And distinguished members of the House Armed Services Committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear today and report on the readiness of your Marine Corps. The Marine Corps remains dedicated to our essential role as our nation's naval expeditionary force in readiness. During 15 years of conflict, we focused investment on ensuring Marines were prepared for the fight, and they were. Today, our operational tempo remains as high as it was during the peak of our operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. Our continued focus on deployed unit readiness combined with the fiscal uncertainty and funding reductions leave your Marine Corps facing substantial readiness challenges. Your Marine Corps is insufficiently manned, trained, and equipped across the depth of the force to operate in an ever-evolving operational environment. Due to years of fiscal constraints, the Marine Corps is fundamentally optimized for the past and has sacrificed modernization and infrastructure to sustain our current readiness posture. In addition to the increased resources for operations and maintenance needed to improve current readiness across the entirety of our Marine Corps, we require your support in 3 key areas to regain the readiness levels our nation requires of us. Over the past 18 months, we have identified various end strengths and associated capabilities and modernization required to operate in the threat environment characterized by complex terrain, information warfare, electromagnetic signatures, and a contested maritime domain. We need to increase our active component end strength. We are confident that an increase of 3,000 Marines per year maintains a rate of growth consistent with the effective recruiting and accession while maintaining our high standards. Our bases, stations, and installations are the platforms where we train and generate our readiness. The continued underfunding of facilities, sustainment, restoration, and modernization and military construction continues to cause progressive degradation of our infrastructure and creates increased long-term cost. We have a backlog of over $9 billion in deferred maintenance for our infrastructure. We require up-to-date training systems, ranges, and facilities support the fielding of new equipment and simulation systems that facilitate improved training in standards and readiness. Supporting the joint force requirements of the past 15 years consumed much of the useful life of our legacy systems, and fiscal uncertainty and reduced defense spending for significant delays in our modernization efforts. There is significant cost associated with maintaining and sustaining any legacy system without a proportional capability increase associated with that investment. As we continue to spend limited fiscal resources to sustain legacy systems developed for threats of 20 years ago, we risk steadily losing our competitive advantage against potential adversaries. We need to modernize our ground tactical vehicle and aircraft fleets soonest. Accelerating the investment in amphibious ships is necessary to reach our wartime requirement. If forced to continue to pursue the path of investing in legacy systems in lieu of modernizing our force, we will find our Marine Corps optimized for the past and increasingly at risk to deter and defeat our potential adversaries. On behalf of all of your Marines, sailors, and their families and civilians that support their service, we thank the Congress and this committee for the opportunity to discuss the key challenges your Marine Corps faces. While much work needs to be done, the authorizations within, coupled with the sufficient funding and the repeal of the Budget Control Act, will put us on a path to rebuild and sustain our Marine Corps for the 21st century. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. I want to briefly touch on some of the facts, largely in y'all's written testimony, but also some press report, and I'll just go down the line. General Allen, you in your written testimony, it says only about 1/3 of the brigade combat teams and 1/4 of our combat aviation brigades and half of our division headquarters are ready. And then you say only 3 brigade combat teams could be called upon to fight tonight in the event of a crisis. Now, I think we have 58, right, brigade combat teams, and your testimony is that only 3 of them could be called upon to fight tonight. Is that right?
That's accurate, Chairman, and it reflects the realities of both the op-tempo and the recurring demand that our forces face. When we say fight tonight, that means that unit needs no additional people, no additional training, and no additional equipment. And 3 is where we're at today. And those that we say are ready, the 1/3, it's actually just higher than that, of our forces that are ready require somewhere in the range of 30 days to ensure that they have everything they need to meet the demands of immediate combat.
Well, you kind of hope an enemy will be accommodating and give us the 30 days so that we can be ready. You then go on the next page and talking about equipment and say, today we are outranged, outgunned, and outdated. And then in your testimony you also say, so if you put all this together, the Army can only accomplish defense planning guidance requirements at high military risk. Now, General Milley has kind of talked about this, but explain what that means to us. My layman's ears seem to hear that we can only do what the country asks us to do with a pretty darn good chance that we won't be successful. Am I right?
Chairman, basically what it comes down to is a term that you heard General Wilson use from General MacArthur. We will be too late to need. Our soldiers will arrive too late. Our units will require too much time to close the equipping and manning and training gaps. And as you highlighted, hope is not a method, and we cannot count on the enemy providing us that window of opportunity to close those gaps. The end result is excessive casualties, both to innocent civilians and to our forces that are already forward stationed to close the rest of the force required to accomplish the mission.
Admiral, I had several things I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned the Navy is smaller than it has been in the last 99 years. But I want to ask you about a story that came out yesterday that you don't mention in your testimony that says, according to the Navy, 53% of all Navy aircraft cannot fly. And that is about twice the historic norm. If you go to F-18, 62% are out of service, 27% in major depot work, and 35% simply awaiting maintenance or parts. This is a press story from yesterday in Defense News. Are those statistics accurate?
Yes, sir, they are.
It's a little hard for me to know what question to ask next. 53% of all Navy aircraft can't fly, and 62% of our strike F-18s can't fly today. That's our status.
Yes, sir. When it comes to the strike fighter community, that's our Legacy Hornets A through Ds and our Super Hornets E and F versions. Our Legacy Hornets, which we in the Marine Corps operate today, are well beyond their design life, let alone their service life. They were designed for 6,000 hours. We're extending the life on those Hornets into the 8,000 to 9,000 hour range. They've been around as long as General Walters and I have been serving, for the most part, so they're pretty old. It takes about twice the amount of man hours to fix one of those jets as it was designed to take, which gives you a pretty good indication how old they are. And the capacity in our depots has been diminished since sequestration and furloughs back in 2013, and we're trying to rebuild that capacity today to try to get those jets turned around. So on a typical day in the Navy, about 25 to 30% of our jets and our airplanes are in some kind of depot maintenance or maintenance which does not allow them to fly. So your statistics of twice that amount or two-thirds today is a reflection of how hard we've flown these jets over the last 15 years. And the fact that we have not recapped those jets, in other words, we haven't built new, or we have not bought enough new ones to replace them, and we've been waiting for quite some time for the F-35 to deliver, which we were counting on 7, 8 years ago to start filling in those holes. All of that adds up to the numbers you reflected.
Well, it is true, is it not, that a fair number of the strikes against Al-Qaeda and ISIS over the years have been carried out by these Navy jets?
Yes, sir. We can and we do put ready airplanes and ready crews forward on deployment.
Yeah.
As I reflected in my opening statement, there's no depth on the bench to go behind them, though, if we had the surge forces. I think it's consistent with what General Allen just described in the Army.
Yeah.
We will be late to get there if we want to have full-up equipment to get to the fight in the future.
And turning to the Air Force, General Wilson, you testified in your written statement, and I think you said this, the smallest and oldest Air Force we've ever had. Average aircraft age is 27 years old today. But you go on and talk about the pilot shortage, where at the end of fiscal year 16, we were 1,555 total pilots short and 3,400 aircraft maintainers short. What I'm struck by is we have we're short 1,500 pilots, 3,400 maintainers in the smallest Air Force we've ever had. Certainly that translates, does it not, into less military capability?
Chairman, that's exactly right. As a context, in 1991, we went to Desert Storm. Our Air Force was 500,000 people and 134 fighter squadrons. Today, we find ourselves at 317,000 total force, 317,000 in our active force with 55 fighter squadrons. You mentioned the pilot shortage. Of those numbers, we have 723 short in our fighter pilots. We don't have a problem bringing people into the Air Force. We're doing our best to retain people, but when you're flying old equipment, 27 years old as an average, and you're short on maintainers to fix those airplanes, and to talk to the Vice Chief, the Vice CNO, you talked about the depots. As they break into the depots and they find things that they've never found before, and it takes real craftsmen and artisans to fix those airplanes, and it takes longer, we're flying less. Again, as a matter of context, at the very bottom, in the late 70s of what we called the hollow force, fighter pilots were flying about 15 sorties a month and about 20 hours. Today, we're flying less hours and less sorties than we were in the late 70s. Now, we didn't get there overnight in the 70s, and we found a way out of that. There's a way out of this. The way out of this starts first with manpower. We need more manpower to be able to plus up our force. We need to get the right training. With the right training, we can bring in the right weapon system support. With the weapon system support, we can increase the flying hours. With the flying hours, we reduce the ops tempo, and we need time. And over time, we'll increase our readiness. But we think it'll take 6 to 8 years to bring our readiness level back where it needs to be. But it starts first with people.
6 to 8 years under a favorable scenario, I assume.
Yes, Chairman. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to toot our own horn, but thank goodness we tried to stop the shrinkage of end strength in last year's NDAA. We hadn't fixed anything, but hopefully we kept it from getting worse. Finally, Marine Corps, General Walters, one of the things that just stuck out to me in your written testimony was the statement that flight hour averages per crew per month are below the minimum standards required to achieve and maintain adequate flight time and training and readiness levels. So it's similar, I guess, to what General Wilson just said. We are flying less now than we have even in the hollow force of the 70s, or that was what he said. You say below the minimum standards to achieve and maintain flight time, training, and readiness levels. My question to you, what are the consequences of that? What does it mean if you can't even meet the minimum level of flight hours?
Thank you for the question, Chairman, and thank you to this committee for trying to get us back on our RBA recovery in the last 2 years. We have made some improvement. To your question about flying hours and what it means, each type model series has a minimum requirement. It's important to understand what that minimum requirement is. And it's somewhere between 16 and 18 hours per pilot per month. There's an outlier there on C-130s, which is about 23 hours. And what that does is keeps them current in their current capabilities. It does not guarantee that they'll be proficient or they'll be the A-team to defeat an enemy in a near-peer fight. If you're looking for a number, the last time I saw us that good was when the pilots were getting about 25 hours per month. And that would make them current and proficient. What it really means in the end is that we're sending a lot of these, we will send in a major combat operation, we'll send a lot of pilots that don't have the adequate training, and there's historical example after historical example when flight time required is not produced and the results in an air fight, both air to ground and air to air.
Okay, so you said 16 to 18 hours per month is the minimum.
That's the minimum, and what we're getting now is between 12 and 14. So that's the minimum to maintain your currency. But currency is not nirvana for a war fight. Proficient pilots is what we're aimed for, and that's across every capability we have. There are certain tasks that you have to do them once, but doing them multiple reps and sets is what makes a world-class military organization.
You might say it's kind of like getting ready to play in the Super Bowl but not being able to practice.
That's a very good analogy, sir.
Mr. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank each of the Vice Chiefs for their excellent testimony. Each one of you has revealed critical gaps in our readiness, and I hope that all the members of this committee are listening closely. I want to focus particularly on what this committee and this Congress can do to solve some of these problems, because I think you gentlemen have highlighted the problems very well. General Allen said it in plain English, and let me foot stomp his testimony. I'm going to quote here. The most important actions you can take, steps that will have both positive and lasting impact, will be to immediately repeal the 2011 Budget Control Act and ensure sufficient funding to train, man, and equip the FY17 NDAA authorized force. Let me emphasize again, immediately repeal the 2011 Budget Control Act. The General goes on to say, unless this is done, additional top-line and OCO funding, something that Congress has traditionally done, though nice in the short term, will prove unsustainable, rendering all your hard work for naught. Could there be a clearer, more dire warning to this committee? So I thank you, General, for offering that clear-cut, plain English testimony. It's not your problem, it's our problem. Another of the witnesses emphasized that we've had 9 consecutive continuing resolutions. How can anyone, even the ablest manager in the world, manage that? 9 consecutive ones. So my main message today is for the newer members of our committee who perhaps haven't learned all the bad habits that some of the older members of the committee have unfortunately gotten used to. This is the chance for a new day, a new approach, to have a stronger military that is more ready for all the threats we face. And this is one of the most bipartisan committees in Congress. It should be. These are issues we should all be able to agree on. Managing our affairs responsibly. Because another way to put this is the worst enemy we face is ourselves. Our BCA Act of 2011 probably poses a greater threat to our military than any foreign adversary. So why do we hurt ourselves? There is no good reason for this, and General Allen said it better than I could possibly say it. If you would like to elaborate, General Allen, you're welcome to, but again, the problem is ours. It's not yours. We should solve this sequestration problem.
Well, I know, to reinforce your point, I was in the operational force when the BCA took effect and caused us to cancel 7 combat training center rotations. And that is a generation of leaders that can never get that experience back. And we cannot go back there. We cannot do that to ourselves again. And it is, for most of our services, we are still climbing out of that abyss of the BCA impact when it was impacted mid-year. My belief is if we can do away with BCA, if we can fund our services to the authorized end strength in this budget year and the next, you will do more good for the sustained readiness build of our services than you can begin to imagine.
Thank you, General. Let me end by just saying all members of this committee should be asking leadership in our respective parties why we can't repeal BCA now, as the General suggests. You'll get all sorts of excuses, all sorts of half reasons, but none of them are good enough. Now's the time to take action on this, and any delay is inexcusable. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
At the end of last week's hearing, there were 3 members who sat through the hearing but still did not get a chance to ask questions. So I promised them they could go first today, and then we will go back to regular order as we usually do. First up is gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, I just want to say to the panel, you guys are warriors and heroes, not only in our eyes, but in the eyes of all Americans. And I know that truly you put the interests of this nation first, and I thank you for that. That being said, I read your testimony, and I noticed you use a lot of military jargon, and I understand all the Army stuff. I don't necessarily, and most of the Marine stuff, but I don't understand the Air and the Naval. So today, you know, a lot of people are watching this on Fox News and other places, so I ask as much as you can, speak like a civilian or speak like someone who is not in the military, because acronyms have a tendency of them not understanding what it is. First, I want to start with the air, something I'm unfamiliar with, General Wilson, or as much as I should, but I have Columbus Air Force Base, the home of the 14th Flying Training Wing, and it's located in my district. And these men and women train on all of our platforms in the Air Force are trained right there in Columbus, Mississippi. Flies more sorties than anywhere else in the world, to my knowledge, right out of Columbus Air Force Base. But I'm concerned when they leave Columbus Air Force Base that they aren't getting the hours on the platform, not the trainer, but on the actual platform that they're going to be trying to fly the adequate number of hours to be ready and to make sure that we save lives, because that's what it comes down to when they're not trained, is saving lives, because an unprepared pilot can't do the job. Tell me how many hours we're getting today and how that impacts your readiness to do our mission on the battlefield.
Yeah, Congressman Kelly, thanks for the question. And as you know, as we talked before, I commanded the 14th Flying Training Wing in Columbus. It is the busiest Air Force base in our Air Force. Flies more sorties than anybody. Does a fantastic job producing pilots for Air Force. And today's pilots, we're not flying enough. We're not flying enough hours or sorties. So as I mentioned earlier, today's combat fighter pilots are flying less hours and less sorties than they were flying in the late 70s. They're averaging about 10 sorties a month and about 14 hours a month. And that's too few for the missions that we need to be able to fly. Today, when we talk about high spectrum or high-end readiness, we need to be prepared to fight any adversary. Our adversaries around the globe have been looking at how we fight, and they're training and modernizing their forces. They have sufficient capability of fighter airplanes like ours, and are also developing what we call fifth-generation stealth-type fighters, both in China and Russia. They've watched how we're fighting, and they're preparing their forces. We need to be prepared to fight any adversary. We're extremely good today and are ready to fight in the Middle East against violent extremists. But we need to be ready to fight against any adversary. So we need more flying hours, but to get more flying hours, we need more people. Today, our Air Force, we bottomed out at 311,000 people. Thanks to your help, we're up to 317 at the end of this past fiscal year. We want to grow to 321,000 people here in the next coming year. If we do that, that brings us to about 90% manning. But as anybody knows, 90% manning, effective manning, because you always have people that are deployed or can't do the job or in training, leaves you about 75% effective manning. We think we need to grow the Air Force.
Let me stop, because I had another question that I really want to get to. Because when we talk about BCTs, or we talk about MEWs, or we talk about fighter wings, or the number of ships or carrier groups, those things are important. And I think a lot of America doesn't understand. We're rotating the fresh equipment out of units to make combat-ready units, and that by doing that, it decreases the readiness of the future deployments. And so, have you guys in writing, I would ask that each of you, let me know how many BCTs you need and what the personnel in strength that the Army needs, and not only that, but the number of new M1 systems, so that we're not rotating equipment. They used to wouldn't let us hotbed in the Army when I was in there, General Allen. They wanted a crew on his tank, because you get a familiarity with that piece of equipment, and we're having to hotbed everything that we have in the military today. A hotbed means a crew uses another crew's equipment because it's newer and up to date. So do you guys have an idea of what your in strength you think we need to be ready to meet today's missions, and also the number of equipment, both in modernization and just replacing the old stuff? And if you could address that, and I'll start with you on General Walters.
Yes, sir. The number of Marines we need, in my written statement, I said I think we need a minimum of 194. But it's also interesting, you've hit on the point. So why are we hot racking the equipment? Why are we moving the equipment around? Because for 8 or 10 years, we have modernization programs in place to replace our old equipment, but they're delivering over a 30-year time frame, and we're buying them at a minimum level. The example for us, the prime example, is we have a 40-year-old amphibious vehicle, and we're putting a survivability upgrade on it on a third of them, because we won't deliver the other ones, the new ones yet. JLTV, I have all kinds of needs for light tactical vehicles that have been around for 20 years, but we're buying the joint light tactical vehicle at a very shallow rate. It'll take us 20 years to get there. And probably the poster child for us is I have a light armored vehicle that's 34 years old, and because of the fiscal constraints we've been under, we never even thought about replacing it. So we have an obsolescence program on there. It's not the best use of our money, and the Marines deserve new equipment for the threat.
Chairman, I thank you, but just to mention, OCO does not allow them to modernize like top-line funding, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. And if others of you would like to respond in writing to Mr. Kelly's question, that's great. We got to stay reasonably on time, as Mr. Cooper said. We've got lots of folks on this committee. Mr. Carbajal.
Thank you, Chairman Thornberry, and thank you to all our witnesses, and in particular, thank you for your service to our country. As a former Marine, I'm very honored to be able to be part of this committee and to address you today. It is quite clear from your testimonies today and from our previous hearings that our military faces incredibly diverse threats, some of which are well prepared for, and some of which remain to be a work in progress. There is no question we must continue to maintain a strong military force, and Congress must do its part to provide the necessary resources to ensure readiness. However, as all of you will probably agree, sequestration is not the answer. It will neither balance our budgets nor improve our military readiness. Many, if not all of you, have indicated that the #1 risk to readiness is sequestration. I believe the question we must ask ourselves is, what are we trying to protect? As we continue to impose arbitrary cuts to our country's education and health systems, and not take steps to protect our environment. I believe we will be left with a hollow nation with nothing more for the most superior armed forces to protect. I believe in order to develop an effective strategy, we must decide what our desired end state is for each of the threats and priorities our military leaders identify, and then look at what resources are needed to meet these desired goals. Better oversight and accountability systems must be put in place to ensure not only an effective but an efficient military. I believe it is a disservice to the American people for Congress to be funding cost overruns. To this end, my question to all of you is, what steps has each service taken in order to increase oversight and accountability to its various programs and operations in order to eliminate wasteful spending? Can you provide us with some examples of savings your service has identified? And I say this because it's no surprise to you that on occasion there are many articles in the media that identify this wasteful spending, and yet we have so many priorities that we are being asked to consider. I'd like to hear from each one of you if possible.
Well, thank you, Congressman, and thank you for your service. Semper Fidelis. We love the United States Marine Corps, too, even in the United States Army, so we appreciate your service. I would first highlight the fact that you spoke of two significant challenges. First of all, the threats that we face in this uncertain environment that we operate, and the savings that we must continue to be pursuing as good stewards of the resources that you, the Congress, provide to us. On the first piece, the other significant challenge to us, in addition to sequestration, is continuing resolutions. Continuing resolutions deny us the opportunity to implement new programs, right, like the ability to upgrade our opposing force capability at our combat training centers as we identify capabilities our adversaries are using that we are likely to face. We must train against those. We must upgrade our capability to do that. We cannot do that under continuing resolution conditions. So we would also appreciate the passage of an appropriations bill, obviously, in the very near future. In terms of savings, a couple of critical initiatives the United States Army is underway with to continue to be good stewards of the resources that you provide. We have a strategic portfolio review process that looks at all of our acquisition programs across all domains and identifies the highest priority programs and ensures that we're moving money away from those that are less important and funding those that we must deliver as fast as possible to ensure that we can equip our forces in the future. The second thing is to ensure we achieve auditability, which is a critical requirement that we must deliver to the nation. That is well underway. We have made progress year over year. We estimate we will probably still have work to do at the end of this year to get to full auditability, but we are progressing as rapidly as we can. One of the programs that allows us to do that is our GFEBS software program that enables us to see ourselves accurately across all our funding systems. We need to upgrade that program based on the findings of prior year audits. We cannot do that in a continuing resolution environment. So again, a couple of points to your very accurate questions.
And I hope the gentleman will work with us on our acquisition reform efforts of the last 2 years, and they will continue. Mr. Khanna.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your graciousness in allowing junior members a chance to participate, and you're offering this opportunity. Thank you to the witnesses for your extraordinary service to our nation and the extraordinary sacrifices you have each made. My question concerns cybersecurity. One of the things that I often hear from companies is the burden that they actually have to have cybersecurity. And you never would expect our companies to have private defense forces against conventional attacks, but a large portion of their budgets are going to defend against cyber attacks. And we know that there are about 240,000 cybersecurity jobs that are unfilled because folks don't have the skills. Many people in the private sector will say the best folks are those who've been trained either by the military or the government, and there are just not enough of them for them to come into the private sector. So my question for all the branches, and I don't know whichever one is most relevant, is what can we in Congress do to help you better prepare in training folks equipped in cybersecurity? What do you need for the military, and what do you think you can do to help get more trained folks who can then go into the private sector?
I'll start, Congressman, and thank you for that question. Incredibly important area for all of us operating in the cyber domain each and every day. I would offer that one very important authorization that you could provide to us is increased flexibility in cyber program funding. The adversary is moving at light speed in their attacks of our infrastructure and our capabilities, and we have to be able to develop counters and offensive capabilities at the speed of light, and our current systems are not designed that way. So authorizing some funding flexibility specifically for our cyber programs so that we can be more agile, responsive, and capable both on offense and defense would be critical.
Sir, I would add to those very important points that flexibility is also needed in how we manage the people that we have. Your point about the number of vacancies in the civilian market for cyber professionals and the draw that it takes off of the services who do produce incredible talented folks in this world is there. And so we are looking at every opportunity to allow for our sailors who are trained and experienced in this to have opportunities to work inside and outside the Navy, and the flexibility to draw between the active and the reserve and the civilian and back. I think that's how the nation can solve this problem, because we can't keep throwing money at people to try to keep them in. That said, our training and the way we're organized has increased significantly. All of the services that have invested substantial amount of money in the last several years. But cyber is a warfare area that is also, like everything else we do, subject to readiness cuts. And those cuts come in the form of being able to upgrade from Windows X to Windows Y. And we have to take some cuts to those readiness accounts as well as all the other ones as we see a reduced top line. Thanks for the question.
I'd just add that we've shifted in the Air Force from a communication-centric focus to a cyberspace operations focus. And I'd highlight exactly what was mentioned earlier. There's some acquisition reforms I think that can help us to keep up with that speed that the industry is going with, as well as we've made great progress on our civilian hiring and how we can do that, but I think there's more work to be done there. That we're in a competition for talent. We need to bring in the best and brightest. We have fantastic training programs, and then we can help our nation go moving forward, but there's still work to be done in how we bring on civilians into our workforce.
Sir, I'm with all my colleagues here. We need to recruit, train, and maintain that workforce, and we are short, and I think we're short globally. I think this is a problem that's not just, it's replicated in the military, but it's really for the entire country.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman Thornberry, and thank you for your work. Mr. Chairman, with President Trump, Secretary Mattis, this issue has been raised, and what a great team we have here with the Vice Chiefs, too. to work on the issue of readiness. It's very important to me. I'm very grateful to be the chairman of the Readiness Subcommittee. It gives me the opportunity to work with Ranking Member Madeline Boidayo. And we'll be there to back you up in every way we can to promote our troops, protect our country, protect military families. With that in mind, General Wilson, I appreciate in South Carolina, we have Joint Base Charleston Shaw Air Force Base, McIntyre Joint National Guard Base, and North Auxiliary Field. Comments of concern have been raised by prior persons serving in the military. Secretary Deborah Lee James stated, quote, "Less than half of our combat force is ready for a high-end fight," end of quote. And also Air Force Chief of Staff General David Goldfein stated, "Combat operations and reductions in our total force, coupled with budgetary instability and lower than planned funding levels have resulted in the smallest, oldest, and least ready forces across the full spectrum of operations in our history." These are deeply troubling comments for American families. Two questions. General, have these shortfalls affected the Air Force's ability to generate the necessary forces to meet mission requirements? And secondly, do these shortages still exist? And if so, how does the Air Force plan to address them?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman Wilson. The short answer is yes, these still exist. Today we find ourselves less than 50% ready across our Air Force, and we have pockets that are below that. In particular, some of the bases that you mentioned in South Carolina, between Shaw and McIntyre and others, we find, again, not flying enough sorties with enough hours. We know how to fix this. Again, we did this in the late 70s. As we dug out from there, we can do this again. It starts with, as we've talked before, stable, predictable funding that we can, in our case, we believe we need to increase our manpower to 350,000 airmen. That mans 100% of the positions on our books today. And we do that over the next 5 to 7 years. While we bring on the manpower, then we make sure we got all the training behind that for those manpower. Then we can increase our weapon system support, so all our support to our depots and our parts and our supply. On top of that, then we can increase our flying hours, and then we can bring down our ops tempo, and we can get our readiness back. But we also, at the same time, have to modernize the force, and we're doing so. As we're bringing on F-35s, as we're bringing on KC-46, as we're bringing on B-21s, we need to keep those programs on track. Today, we have 75 less F-35s than we planned to have in 2012. We have 95 less MQ-9s than we planned because of sequestration. So today's modernization has a readiness impact in the future. So today's modernization is tomorrow's readiness. We need to focus on that going forward in the future. With those steps, we can dig out of our readiness challenges we have today and bring it up to full spectrum readiness of about 80%.
Thank you for your commitment. And General Walters, I'm really grateful South Carolina has the Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort along with Parris Island. We're very grateful for such extraordinary facilities giving young people extraordinary opportunity to serve our country and achieve to their highest ability. But I am concerned that it was reported last year that we've had only 141 flyable tactical aircraft, that additionally we've had accidents that have just been unprecedented. And from that situation of danger to our pilots and communities, what is the current state of marine aviation? Is there a correlation between aviation mishaps and the ability of a ready basic aircraft? And how do you plan to address this?
Sir, we're addressing the ready basic aircraft issue. We've been doing it for 2 years with the help of Congress. We've turned. We need to get up to 589 ready basic aircraft. That just gives us enough to train with. We're not there yet. We're at 439, so we're 100 and some short. But we're 50 more than we were 2 years ago. So that's in positive. Your last question about correlation to accidents and ready basic aircraft, there is no direct correlation because I've reviewed every accident we've had in the last 2 years. Those pilots have had the adequate time. But I think it's an overall systemic shortfall in readiness in our aviation units.
Thank you all for your service. We appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Ms. Boidayo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. I appreciate the opportunity to continue to highlight the very serious challenges that we face. We have brought ourselves to this point largely by fighting 2-decade-long wars paid for with a credit card while deferring investments in our people, our equipment, and our facilities. This has been further strained by self-imposed fiscal constraints, and our national security apparatus will continue to be hampered without an end to across-the-board sequestration. In the meantime, we must continue to focus our resources on individual operations and maintenance accounts. I have a question for you, Admiral Moran. As we discussed yesterday in my office, there are significant readiness needs facing the Navy, and our ship maintenance infrastructure has limited capacity. Now, the recent unfunded priorities list indicates as much, with ship depot maintenance at the top. However, that conflicts with the administration that has indicated a desire to focus instead on construction. In an ideal world, the Navy would be able to modernize while shrinking the readiness deficit, but the reality is that we do not have a blank check. So my question to you, Admiral, is how does the Navy intend to prioritize these competing needs? In other words, with additional resources, will it focus on immediate actions such as addressing deferred ship maintenance or aviation depot throughout, or instead on building new vessels?
Ma'am, thank you for the question. If additional resources come available in fiscal year 17, we absolutely will put that money towards ship depot maintenance, aircraft maintenance, cybersecurity, the readiness shortfalls we've talked about here this morning. As I stated in my opening, if we don't take care of the foundation of the Navy, which is the 275 ships we have today, it doesn't do us much good to continue to buy new. So it is somewhat of a false choice to choose between the future size of the Navy and the current condition of the Navy, but to your point, the resources are where they are. And if additional funds come available in 17, we will absolutely put them in the readiness accounts.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Admiral. And my second question is open for any of the witnesses. The Department of Defense has been asking for the authority to have another round of BRAC for years, citing that manpower and excess infrastructure are a drain on operations and maintenance budgets, and ultimately affecting readiness. So do you believe the department needs another BRAC? And if a new round were authorized, how would you reallocate the resources that are currently being used to maintain excess capacity? Any one of you? I just need one answer.
Congresswoman Bordello,
my time is running out. So
we have excess capacity in the Air Force. We think we have about 25% excess capacity at our bases. We think that in today's budget environment, it makes sense to invest wisely. So a BRAC would help us to do smart investment of the bases preparing for the future. And we could take the money we're spending on the excess infrastructure and put that back into solving some of our fiscal problems.
So in other words, you're supporting BRAC closures?
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else have a different?
No, I'll
Yes,
pile
Ed.
on. We are in a similar situation, depending on what size force you describe. For 490,000 soldier active force, which is about 25,000 more than we are today, we have 21% excess facilities to need. We save year over year, annually, $1 billion from the 05 BRAC that took place. So it's real money that we really need to reinvest into the deferred maintenance and infrastructure backlog that we have. For the Army, it's $11 billion in deferred infrastructure sustainment, restoration, and modernization.
Thank you.
So it would be very helpful.
I'd say for the Air Force, that number is $25 billion of money that we need to put back into our bases of deferred maintenance.
And General?
Ma'am, we think we're about right, but we'll participate in any BRAC to see if there's any savings with our partners.
Thank you very much. And I submit the rest of my time to the chairman.
Chairman appreciates it. Thank you, ma'am. Gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All of you have an aviation component to your branch of service. There is growing concern about a pilot shortage in the United States military, and I think that is also reflected in the fact that we have a growing demand in civil aviation for pilots. And so what is your approach, if you could all reflect on your approaches in terms of how to deal with that issue, whether it's a retention bonus structure, an enhancement of some sort, but also the fact is that we've got experienced pilots in the United States military leaving for jobs in civilian airlines who would probably still like to affiliate in some way. And so then the question is, should we shift then some of those flying billets from the active duty to the Guard and Reserve? Maybe we'll start with the United States Army and work our way down. Up, maybe. Yeah, okay. You've got helicopter pilots. Okay.
We're not having a problem retaining our helicopter pilots, so I will defer to the other services.
Fantastic. Okay.
We'd like some of your helicopter pilots. Sir, it's a great question. It's one we do focus on a lot as we manage our force. I would tell you that the thing that keeps pilots in our services, speak for the Navy, but I'm sure General Wilson would agree because we've both flown, is to fly. If you don't have the adequate resources of airplanes and money to resource flying hours, that dissatisfaction will show up with people walking out the door. We are all facing that shortage today. Not enough airplanes. We're not fixing them fast enough. We don't have the spare parts that we need. And young men and women are not flying nearly enough to keep the job satisfaction at a level that they would like.
So, Admiral, your view is it is a morale issue based on the ability to get flying hours?
It absolutely is a morale issue. Yes, sir.
General Wilson?
Yeah, today we find ourselves producing about 1,200 pilots a year. And if I add the Navy and the Marines together, we produce about 2,000 pilots a year. The airlines are hiring 4,000 pilots a year. Right, so I think this is bigger than just a service problem. I think this is a national problem that we have to be able to get at and work with industry on how we do that. Certainly the Guard and Reserves are a big part of this. Certainly the whole team on how we go forward in this. We can recruit lots of people to fly. We don't have a problem there. Retaining them is a problem. Today, for the last 5 years, our retention of pilots has declined. We need to keep about 65% after the 10-year point. Today, we're doing less than half of that. So I'd say it's a quality of life and quality of service. So as the Admiral said, we're doing everything we can to improve, to reduce the additional duties, all the other burdens, the administrivia on our pilots, and let them do their job. And to build that culture that most military pilots, the warfighting culture ethos that you see in the squadrons, that will keep people in the service. But there's certainly a cultural aspect to this, but there's also to reduce the quality, improve the quality of life and reduce the administrative burdens on our crews and let them fly.
Sure.
But this is a national problem. It's not just a service problem.
The Guard and Reserve have pilots who have served on active duty that transfer into the Guard and Reserve and that are flying in civilian airlines. And so are you looking at all at restructuring?
Absolutely. That's all part of how we're looking at it. And we're engaging with all the corporate airline leaders on how do we do this together and how do we do this smarter. But right now we have a math problem that doesn't close because we produce 2,000, the nation needs about 4,000.
General Walters?
Sir, fortuitous, we have a meeting with the Commandant tomorrow to discuss this particular issue and all the levers you just described, the reserves, how do we keep them once we get them? And I'll add one more is how long do we sign them up for when we sign them up? All those will be part of it, and we might end up having to pay a bonus for those select people to keep them around and to make it so we can get them a draw. In the end, it's their willingness to serve and their value that they put on service that I think will be the biggest magnet. I don't think we can dump enough money on them to keep them there just with the money.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the witnesses for your excellent testimony this morning. Admiral Moran, I'd like to, again, go back to your very frank advice that we really need to focus on maintenance and repair in terms of just getting to meet the operational demand. Shipbuilding, which I think is going to be an exciting year with the FSA that came out, but having said that, that's a long game, and we're not going to see the fruits of that for 2017 action for years to come. So your description about the fact that there is this backlog building up of work that's not getting performed, I was wondering if you could be a little more descriptive about how that looks in terms of whether it's carriers or surface ships or submarines. What's happening out there in terms of that backlog that's building up?
Yes, sir, Congressman. Thanks for the question. First of all, in 17 alone, if we do not see some kind of supplemental come in for this fiscal year without a CR, within a month, we're going to have to shut down air wings. We're going to have to defer maintenance on several availabilities for our surface ships and submarine maintenance facilities. We are just flat out of money to be able to do that. I think everyone here knows that in 17, the Navy took a $5 billion cut in its top line. If that comes to fruition, that's $2 billion of readiness cuts we had to take, which is immediately applied to the things like ship avails. So we have had cases in the past here, in the recent past, where we've had to decertify a submarine from being able to dive because we cannot get it into nuclear maintenance that is needed. The crew on the USS Albany, for example, went over 48 months before getting out of the yards because several delays, at least 4 different delays, because of other priorities. And those other priorities start with our SSBN force, which is our Nuclear Strategic Deterrent Submarine Force, carriers, and then we get to SSNs. So if any of those get disrupted, a carrier goes along in one of our public yards, then we're going to bump things like our SSNs. So that crew of Albany, the CO took over at the start of that maintenance avail, gave up command before the end of that maintenance avail, and the crew, the entire crew, did not deploy. To someone's point here earlier, you cannot buy back that experience.
Right.
And so those are the kinds of real impacts we're seeing in the yards because of the shortage of resources and the continuing rating of the readiness accounts in order to keep the rest of the Navy whole.
Thank you. I mean, that story about the Albany really resonates, I think, because in this room, we've heard from Admiral Harris at PACOM, General Scaparrotti at UCOM that they need more submarines, I mean, now. And to the extent that, we're not going to build a Virginia-class now because it takes 5 years, but if we can get, the Albany and the Boise and those others out and underway, then, we can respond to those, combatant commanders. So let's assume, we fully fund, we deal with the resource issue, and we also deal with the funding certainty issue, which your testimony pointed out as another, big problem. I mean, there's still, I think, are issues, though, in terms of allocation of work and in the shipyards. I mean, in your testimony, you said for a variety of reasons, our shipyards are struggling to get our ships through maintenance periods on time. So So again, let's assume that we take care of some of the resource questions. I mean, how can we, deal with that? I mean, can we call on the private yards to help take on some of the work, and can Congress help with that process?
Yes, sir. You're absolutely correct. Obviously we try to maximize our public yard workload, but we try to smooth out those god-awful sand charts we're all looking at, we're used to staring at, to try to smooth out the work across those yards. And where we need that extra capacity, we do use the private yards to do it. Montpelier is a good example today that's in EB, for example. So we will continue to look at those. The problem is the very late determination that we no longer have the capacity in the public yards. When we turn to the private yards at that moment, it becomes a very expensive proposition. So the degree to which we can take advantage of your support and working with our private yards to try to drive down the costs, it makes it easier for us to have to surge to those private yards when public yards become the capacity the work exceeds the capacity because of delays that are already there, if that makes sense.
Thank you. I think Admiral Kevin McCoy described it as one shipyard. That should be our philosophy.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Yield back.
Story about the Albany is amazing. Mr. Franks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of the witnesses for your noble service to America. Mr. Chairman, I have what's probably somewhat of a redundant question, but it seems important to emphasize. On March 22nd of last year, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunsford, said, quote, absorbing significant cuts of the last 5 years has resulted in our underinvesting in critical capabilities. And unless we reverse sequestration, we will be unable to execute the current defense strategy, close quote. So General Walters, and might ask a follow-up by General Allen, if you maybe keep the responses fairly concise. In your professional military opinion, is your service able to execute our current defense strategy with our current force levels?
Sir, if your definition of the strategy is to do two things simultaneously, the answer is no.
And for the United States Army, as General Milley has testified before this committee, and as have I in prior years, only at high risk.
Mm-hmm. So maybe to give you a real-world example, when you talked about two scenarios, in your professional military opinion, at its current force level, would your service, and I'll begin with the Army again first, General Walters, would your service be capable of executing a Korea scenario while maintaining your current commitments around the world?
Sir, we would be able to execute a Korea scenario, but would have to draw from other commitments in the world to make it on the timeline required.
And likewise, for the United States Army, we would both draw from drawdown committed forces elsewhere, as well as have forces arriving late to need based on current readiness levels, as we talked about at the outset with the chairman.
With your, and I'll broaden it to the committee, whoever would like to take a shot at it, with your current planned end strength levels, can you meet the force planning construct outlined in the 2014 Quadrennial Defense Review to, quote, defeat a regional adversary and deny another aggressor in another region? And maybe General or Admiral Moran maybe take a shot at it.
Well, my answer would be very consistent with my brothers here, and that is we will be able to employ our force, but at great risk to being there late and at higher casualties than we would expect.
And I would second that.
And no disagreement on the panel. So final question, Mr. Chairman, and I address it to all of you. In your professional military opinions, is your services, your respective services, too small given current and emerging mission requirements?
Yes, we are. For the current defense planning guidance, now the Secretary of Defense has directed a new strategic review that could result in a revised force construct requirement, but we will undergo that process and provide our recommendations on what the size of the Army must be, but today it is too small.
I agree with General Allen for the Navy as well.
Same for the Air Force.
Same for the Marine Corps, sir.
Well, Mr. Chairman, they say that sometimes, you know, there's nothing more encouraging to hear than to hear your own convictions fall from another's lips. But in this case, I think I'm more alarmed by that than anything else, and yet it does seem to be a consistent circumstance. And I just hope the committee and the country and the new administration is considering the responses of these gentlemen carefully. And with that, I would yield back. Thank you all.
Thank you. Ms. Tsongas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today as we have this very important discussion. Last week, and this has been in the context of a number of hearings that we've had to sort of discuss this global situation that we have to deal with and deal with appropriately and successfully. And last week, this committee had the opportunity to hear from General Petraeus and John McLaughlin about some of the pressing threats and challenges facing our nation. And in their testimony, I was struck by the focus they both placed on the shifting global balance of power and the need for the United States to maintain its technological superiority in relation to both Russia and China. And just last week, the New York Times reported on Chinese advances in computer science and engineering in relation to declining U.S. investments in these areas. Historically, our nation's national labs and our FFRDCs have led the way in advancing new technology for our nation's military. But today, private firms, many located overseas, are increasingly taking the lead, making investments in those technologies that have both consumer and military applications, so they see a dual benefit to it. And robotics and artificial intelligence are just two examples of where the private sector has been increasingly successful. So as we're talking today about the many challenges we face, and much of the emphasis is on end strength and the need for more people, it seems to me that as we're thinking about how we maintain our competitive advantage, that it's not just about end strength, but it's about how we use cutting-edge technologies to leverage fiscally thoughtful investments, whether they be in people or other areas. And so to that end, General Wilson, and this certainly comes as I am a representative from Massachusetts, we have great labs and FFRDCs in our state that have done such great work. What is the Air Force doing to modernize its labs and defense-focused FFRDCs to make sure that we are able to keep the Air Force at the cutting edge of technology? And how much of a priority is it for you, given the many competing demands for investment?
Yes, Congresswoman, we have investments going into MIT Lincoln Labs to help improve the infrastructure there. I've been out to visit them, and I can tell you they are absolutely world-class. And there's some technologies that they're working on. You mentioned AI and robotics. They're also working on directed energy, some things that can truly change the game. So that's an important focus of our Air Force. As we modernize our force, we need to modernize smartly across the area, the specific areas. And as you mentioned, industry in many areas is leading us in that way. So we're collaborating with industry, whether we work with folks like DARPA, our Air Force Research Lab, with this Strategic Capabilities Office, Dr. Roper and his team, all the FFRDCs and all the national labs that also are reaching out with all the private sector to make sure that we can stay up to date with them. I look at this as almost like the the FSRM, Facilities Restoration Modernization Accounts. We have to invest so much today in our technology that's going to get us to tomorrow. Right now, our R&D is about 2%. We need to keep it at that or even grow that, because otherwise our adversaries will outpace us. But we have a great collaboration with all the national labs. They're truly national treasures. We need to leverage those to help us stay ahead of all of our adversaries going forward.
Well, and those national treasures don't remain national treasures without the significant investment that that needs to be made in them. And I know, given the constrained resources, I just want to be reassured that we aren't short-sighted, and that we're not putting in making those tough choices, we're not putting what we need to, because technology has a long timeline, and yet it also can move very quickly. And we don't want to be behind the 8 ball because we've just been too short-sighted in some of our near-term investments. And so to that end, also, General Allen, I wanted to ask you how you're prioritizing your investments. Again, Massachusetts has a great facility that really focuses on the soldier and how to best protect the soldier, to make them as ready as possible, but again, fully equipped and thinking thoughtfully. What kind of investments the Army is making?
Well, thank you, Congresswoman, and I'm sorry you're missing the championship parade in Boston this morning.
I'm very sorry myself.
That's a great sacrifice on your part, we likewise fully leverage not only Natick Labs, as you've highlighted, but also MIT Lincoln Labs. I have been there in the last 2 months on several programs that are critical to us to be able to continue to dominate in the multi-domain environment of the future. And we will continue to leverage both the great soldier enhancement initiatives that come from Natick, as well as the technology that is critical. You highlighted the importance of technology to readiness. It is the right balance of capability and capacity that makes a ready force, and all of us are trying to ensure that we maintain that balance as we move forward, ma'am.
Thank you. I yield back.
Ms. Hartzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today for this very important hearing and pretty sobering testimony, but I think we all need to hear it. General Wilson, I appreciate your highlighting the recent mission that went from Whiteman over to Libya, and we're so proud of them. And your testimony just goes right along with the question I wanted to ask, where you talked about how you feel like that our training makes us capable for Middle Eastern conflict, but we need to have peer adversary training. And I know with your 35 years in the Air Force as a pilot and flying B-1 and your participation in Red Flag over the years, I wanted to ask you about the capability of that training exercise to meet our near-peer competitors that we are facing today. So is the Air Force training with a fight tonight mentality against a high-end threat like China and Russia? And what I mean by this is, are you confident in the Air Force's ability to accurately train against a near-peer adversary? Can you give our young men and women a glimpse of what Night 1 in Kaliningrad would look like? Can you prepare them and put their families' mind at ease such that a flare-up in the South China Seas would look routine?
Yeah, Congressman Hartzler, we are putting significant investment into our ranges and infrastructure at places like Nellis Air Force Base. The Red Flag that I started flying with in the 80s, we've changed it considerably in how we incorporate space and cyber into it, but the range infrastructure, the threats, the way we can replicate threats hasn't improved to a significant degree till recently. We've changed that. We've put significant investment into the range infrastructure to give us the right threat emitters, the right ability to give us a Kaliningrad-like environment with high-end threats and allow our crews to be able to train in that. We're not there yet, though. We're just started that investment to improve our ranges and infrastructure. But that will be critical going forward. It's also critical that we invest in our what we call live virtual constructive training. Because in the future, I'm not going to have the flying hours or the money to be able to train an F-35 pilot and give them all the training outdoors in the live environment. I'm going to have to do some of that in the virtual or constructive environment. So we're putting money into that live virtual constructive so that our folks can be at home station and we can replicate a Red Flag-like environment or a high-end training scenario to give them the most realistic training possible. But it's important that we continue that investment of our ranges, our infrastructure, and our live virtual constructive environments going forward.
So if 100 was the number for feeling very, very confident that you'd be able to go up against the training was adequate for 5th gen, what would be the number where you feel like that we'd be able to go up against 5th gen adversary?
Well, again, if you go to one of our Red Flag exercises, it is absolutely fantastic training. The problem is not enough people get to go to it, and we don't do those frequently enough. So that the average crew, I said we call ourselves 50% ready against a high-end threat in certain parts of our Air Force. That number is considerably below that. So again, it takes all those resources we talked about. I got to have the people, the training, the weapon system support, the training ranges, the flying hours, and I got to be and time to do that, to build up that high-end readiness. So today we're not near where we need to be, and I'd say 50%.
All right. Look forward to working with you to help get that up to 100, and so everyone can meet the threats that we are facing. Thank you. I yield back.